I'm very excited to share a fundamental piece of my heart with you all. And actually, I would say that the science of social justice is an excellent way to put the trajectory of my life's work. So if there's one thing that I've discovered that us scientists are really good at, it's putting a label on pretty much everything. So I decided to give my worldview a label, and I thought to call it the science of social justice. But I don't bring this to you today as though it's a finished product, or as though I know exactly what the science of social justice means to all of you. I'm hoping that that's something that we can create as an experience here today. And the magic wand is not necessarily responding to, do we know? I feel like, what's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, technical difficulties. Perfect, excellent, thank you. Thank you to the science gods in a very non-dual fashion. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a thought experiment. And this thought experiment is going to be the beginning of a series of compassionate choices that I'll be offering up to the Sand family today. So if you feel willing and able, please place one hand on your heart, doesn't matter which one, and the other one on your belly, so you can begin to connect into this space of the mind and the brain that exists within the heart and the gut. And you can close your eyes if you wish. Imagine a world where well-being and social justice are one and the same. A world where one cannot exist without the other. Where healthy, interconnected, and safe communities prioritize the felt experience of belonging. Where diversity of identity is considered to be a fundamental element of health, happiness, and flourishing. What would that world look and feel like? So in my everyday life, I work at OHSU, right in the heart of Portland, Oregon. That stands for Oregon Health Science University. It's a complex of about 4 hospitals that I'm very proud to say are the #1 in the state of Oregon. And I work as a neuroscientist and a medical anthropologist in an Alzheimer's lab with my mentor, Dr. Raina Croft. Together, we are focused on developing an intervention to prevent Alzheimer's disease within the African American community of Portland. And my research focuses on the relationship between discovering the causes of stress from a biopsychosocial point of view and how it arises in our bodies. What promotes emotional resilience? And also, what supports cognitive and brain health throughout our lifespan? Together, we are implementing what is called a community-based intervention. And so our intention is to take healthcare from the hospital directly into people's homes and communities. And the intervention is what we call culturally celebratory in nature. And why is that important to be culturally celebratory? It's because culture is an experience that really taps us into our emotional core. It taps us into our identity, and it brings us into a place where we can really begin to emotionally engage with the world and others around us, because culture is something that we all share. It is also my job to understand how mindfulness and self-compassion can be an integral component of our capacity to offer up an intervention that is both healing as well as empowering to this population. So Portland is also a place, I'll share a little bit of a story with you. Within the first week of moving there, I had just moved into my apartment, and I'm living as a little bit of a single mom because my husband currently lives in California. So you can imagine I was preparing my place and my space, and then I look on the news and I see that there is a march of white supremacists happening 2 blocks away from my home. And this had incredible cultural salience and meaning for me, because these are people who are marching through the city of Portland in order to demonstrate the idea that people who look like myself, people with darker skin and complexions, people who have a certain ethnic resonance, if you will, not only do we not belong in this nation, but that they stand fundamentally as a threat to my life and to my safety and to my well-being. And this was powerfully disturbing to me because I grew up in a family where my grandmother had survived Jim Crow, and my mother had survived the segregationist South in Virginia. And so I come from a long legacy, 5 generations of being an American, of being a second-class citizen, and holding both of those identities at the same time. How can you be that? How can you truly feel as though you belong to a nation when you also know that your life is less valuable simply because of the way that you look? But prior to working at OHSU, I was a graduate student for 10 years at UCLA. And in this picture, I'm introducing you to 2 of the mentors that are very close to my heart. On my left, some of you may be familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel. He is the author of The Developing Mind and 8 other New York Times best-selling books. And then on the right is Dr. Mary Helen Immordino-Yang, who's a neuroscientist at USC. And they were very powerful and instrumental in my thinking, developing my thinking about what the science of social justice means to me. In the context of my research at UCLA, I was looking at the experience of students, middle school students who had discovered yoga and meditation in the context of their school. And I have to admit that I came into this research with a little bit of naivete, because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm a meditation instructor, and I somewhat assumed, which goes against the good practices of science, of course this intervention is going to be good for them. And what I found that was totally fascinating was that, yes, for some of them, yoga and meditation was incredibly beneficial because it really tuned them into this emotional center of their hearts. And it did give them the ability to be empowered in terms of how they were able to emotionally regulate themselves in the face of situations like rampant gang violence and homelessness and even abuse inside of their homes. But then there was a whole nother group of students who actually banded together, hundreds of them, to sign a petition to get the intervention kicked out of their school. They insisted that this was a new form of colonization. Think about that. Yoga and meditation as a form of colonization. How can this be? Well, number one, they were never given the choice of whether or not to participate in the intervention. It was forced upon them. And number two, the other thing that I found was that the way in which the intervention was languaged did not give them any opportunity to voice or to be critical about the very real oppression and marginalization and criminalization that they faced in their day-to-day lives. And that made me think, we have got to do better by them. There has got to be a better way to be of service. And perhaps, as a scientist, I need to be thinking about what social justice means in the context of our schools and in our hospitals and in our communities in a far more complex fashion. I'm actually going to skip over some of these quotes because I can see the time that I have left. And I'd like to introduce you now to another one of our speakers who's going to be here at this event today. Her name is Conda Mason, and you can see us here in a picture with Dan Siegel. And we were able to present together at his Interpersonal Neurobiology conference. And one of the things that we were really probing into at this conference was, how can we begin to dismantle and interrogate the lie of the separate self? And so Dan is truly, he's a genius and he's also hilarious. And so he loves coming up with new languages and new terminologies. So he came up with this term, mui, that for him is truly representative of this new way of thinking about dismantling the lie of the separate self in the name of social justice and healing for us all. And in the context of this Interpersonal Neurobiology conference, Otto Scharmer was also present, and he was discussing the concept of a generative field of healing. So I have these two quotes from him. One of the things that Otto said was, "The crisis of our time isn't just a crisis of a single leader, organization, country, or conflict. The crisis manifests across all countries in the form of three major divides: the ecological divide, that is the disconnect between self and nature; the social divide, or the disconnect between self and other; and the spiritual divide, or the disconnect between self and self. The crisis reveals that the old underlying social structure and way of thinking, the old way of institutionalizing and enacting collective social forms, are dying." And I find this to be such an incredibly powerful statement because everywhere that I go, I feel deeply tuned into this dying, the dying of the old ways, and the incredible collective grief and mourning that is a vibrational field that I can sense fills up every single molecule of the space around us, even at the same time that we are all doing our best to not only survive, but to thrive. And so I'm hoping to do another experiment filled with a series of compassionate choices here today, in which perhaps we can experience what I mean by the science of social justice. We're going to generate a social field, or as Otto says, by social field, I mean the structure of the relationship among individuals, groups, and organizations that gives rise to collective behaviors and outcomes. And I'm really hoping today that that collective behavior and outcome will be to tap into a deeper root of the meaning of social justice. So in this picture, you can see me generating my own field of collective healing as I'm teaching a meditation class. And I wonder if you can pick up on some of the peace that I was feeling in this experience. And so I'd like to create what I call a compassionate container with you here today. I'm going to offer up a series of choices that we can all participate in. And the first one will be, if you all feel so inclined, to bring your awareness to your breath. Some of you may want to close your eyes for this experience to really tune into the field that we're generating, but if it doesn't feel comfortable for you to close your eyes, you can leave them partially open. But I would like to ask if we can all bring our attention to the awareness of the breath as it comes in and out of the nostrils. How does it feel? What is that sensation like? How does that bring you in touch with a sense of aliveness and calm? And now we're going to begin a process of orienting, still with the eyes closed. Can you imagine the beautiful faces of the people in the room here today? What are the colors? What are the textures? What are the sounds coming into your ears? And as you tune into this sensory awareness, what is the impact on your body? And then if you will, I would love to offer up this bit of imagery that we imagine that there are deep roots flowing out from the bottoms of our feet, deep, deep into the beautiful ground of this earth that has been supporting us for all of our lives. And as you send that root system out from the bottoms of your feet, can you feel the way that the roots coming from your feet are in fact connected to the roots that are coming from everyone else's feet? Can you connect into the collective root system that is beneath all of us? And then very lastly, and perhaps at this point you may want to put a hand on your belly so that you can tune even deeper into the collective vibration. On the count of 3, take a deep breath and just begin to hum a little bit. And this humming is going to create a sound that is going to tune us all into the collective harmonics that we have generated together. 1, 2, 3. That was so beautiful. So when you slowly and gently begin to open up your eyes, you'll see a series of photos that I have of gorgeous faces appear on the screens. And I invite you into the practice of compassionate viewing, tuning into this harmonic field that we have just generated, knowing that we don't have any idea where these people come from on the earth, but we are compassionately receiving of the energy of their being and noticing what happens inside of the body. I ask you today, what are you feeling? Are there areas of expansion, tingling, tightness? Is there cold? Is there heat? Are there sharp sensations? And beyond that, are there places in your body where you feel nothing at all? Are there places of aliveness or connection, of emotional resonance? So I'd like to offer up just a little bit of what may be a scientifically grounding explanation for what you may have experienced. And this comes from the work of Stephen Porges. And what we're looking at is a description of what happens inside of our nervous systems on a day-to-day basis when we encounter the faces of people in our world who we may or may not feel a sense of belonging with. So perhaps we have been taught, we have been culturally conditioned that, well, we can't just freeze or faint or run away when we encounter someone on the street who makes us feel a certain way. But if there were areas inside of your body that did feel frozen, maybe there was a certain kind of numbness, this is associated with the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system when the parasympathetic brake has been applied. Within our heart, we have what's called the soul nerve or the vagus nerve. And when we're in relationship with one another, and maybe we're in conversation or we're just having some sort of emotional engagement with someone and we feel that that person has actually left the room, this could be an explanation for what's happening. Or when we feel really deeply connected to one another, when we feel that sense of joy and of invitation and of belonging, this too is the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system that is opening us up along the ventral vagal pathway, and it is inviting us into a deeper feeling of presence and of relationship with one another. So I'm beginning to come to the end of my time for this presentation, and I'd love to offer up for you just a little bit of how it is that I have defined the science of social justice in terms of how it is that we are truly connected on a nervous system level to our ability to generate harmonic fields of belonging and resonance, or the exact opposite. I believe we cannot effectively work towards social justice in our communities, nor will we ever know the true value and scope of the evidence-based science that supports our health and our well-being, unless we begin to develop a more nuanced understanding about the internal and biological process of othering and how that can become manifest in thought, and then externalized and enacted in the relationships and the institutions and ideologies that shape the world around us. The science of social justice is the study of the intersectional biopsychosocial impact of the embodied and relational trauma that has resulted from centuries of systemic and institutionalized oppression or othering that has occurred for marginalized and vulnerable populations and ecosystems here in the United States and abroad. It is the scientific and evidence-based study of how systemic oppression has a combined psychological, emotional, and physiological impact upon how we treat ourselves and one another, including the planet, and therefore, because it is compassionate in its intentionality, it is also the study and practice of how we heal these wounds. And so skipping forward, I leave you with this one last quote that I hope will generate many conversations in this gathering in the days to come. The desire to love is not itself love. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love. And I invite you all to make the choice to bring your spiritual and embodied practices and incredible scientific knowledge to the effort to open up inside of yourselves a space of harmonics where all of us can truly begin to belong. Thank you.